Okay. So we are recording tonight's session. I will upload it to the library's YouTube channel tomorrow afternoon. So hopefully no one will have to duck out early, but if for some reason you need steps repeated and or want to try to recreate this again another time, we'll keep the video up for a week or two on our channel. So anyway, thank you for joining us tonight. Victoria's doing a really cool project tonight. She showed me a picture of it, so I'm kind of bummed I don't have a kit to paint along with you guys tonight, but it's really pretty. One thing I do want to mention, for those of you at the end of tonight's session cares to share your image with me, your painting, please email it to me, take a picture and email it to me. I love to see the finished work of a lot of our participants. And last session, I think I uploaded a few of the pictures to our Facebook and our Instagram pages. So if you can remember to do that, I'm sure your work's going to turn out beautiful. So just take a snapshot with your digital camera or your phone and email it to me. I'd love to see all the different artwork and collect it all and post it. So I'm going to go ahead. I guess I'll turn it over to you, Victoria. I know we have a full night. So thank you for joining us and welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, and I do want to say, if at any point during the class you have a question, I love answering questions, so don't feel like you can't ever come off mute. You are welcome to at any point. Since it is being recorded, your question will be recorded on the video, just to give you a heads up on that. And
why this is, I can't hear any of them.
Oh no, someone can't hear. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll get started. First of all, my paper.
Now I'll see if I can get the earbuds to work now that I got the sound at least.
I think that could be Mary Ellen.
Yeah.
We do hear.
I think maybe she doesn't have her volume up. Because we can hear her fine. Anyways, my paper is landscape, so it is the long way up.
I'll watch it later.
Okay. And so that's how I am putting my paper. However, if you wanted to do a vertical like portrait piece, you know, that's completely up to you. I just think that what we're going to do tonight would fit best this way. And it's going to be a pumpkin. I'm going to throw that on the screen really quick so everyone can see it. And we're going to start out with a drawing, and then we're going to mix a orange and a green color together. So again, my paper is landscape. And we're going to start by drawing just kind of the basic oval shape of the pumpkin. Make sure that you have enough room, that you're starting this top of the oval shape so that you can do the stem. So to ensure that, for me, I'm going to start a little bit of a ways down. It is not halfway down. I'd say it's maybe a fourth of the way down. And this line that I drew, I will show it on the screen again so that you know where I'm starting out. It's going to be like this highest part in the back right here. And we're going to come in and add these like textural bumps and stuff in a moment. I will draw a little bit darker because my concern is showing up on the screen for you. But if you can draw a little bit lighter so that way you're not too heavy on the pencil, I think that would be best. So again, I am about a fourth of the way down from the top. and just kind of drawing that general oval shape. And now these are obviously the sides of my pumpkin, leading then into the bottom of my pumpkin. And remember, your eraser is your friend. So I'm just making sure that I'm erasing any lines that, you know, I don't really like. Kind of just fixing my bottom a little bit. And I do want to point out that this is how much room I have left from the bottom of my pumpkin to the bottom of my paper. Again, it's less room than I have from the top. And that's fine because I don't need too much going on at the bottom. Just enough room so that it's not right at the bottom of the paper is what I need. Okay, so like I said, that top line was the furthest line back that we drew. And then I'll come into my pumpkin a little bit and kind of just do this little curved piece. Which is where that stem is going to sit. So that's what the purpose of that is. And I want everyone to check that they've got some room at each edge of that curved piece. So room this way to the edge of the pumpkin and room this way to the edge of the pumpkin. And I probably don't have to remind anyone that pumpkins can be kind of weird, oddly shaped. As long as you don't draw it to look like a zucchini or something, it's gonna look like a pumpkin. So that's just our main concern, that it's oval shaped, and we've got a nice amount of room there. So I'm going to start then to draw the bumps. And if anyone needs me to hold on a minute, or you can type it in the chat, you can come off of mute, whatever is best for you. And what you'll notice that I did was I started at that curve that we did for the center of that pumpkin and kind of drew in this like rectangular shape that has some rounder edges. And I did kind of come and move my bottom line just to kind of accommodate that shape a little bit better. If our drawing isn't like great, our painting can look a little wonky. So that is why I'm taking some time here to really explain what I'm doing. So that is that first kind of main bump on the right side. Does anybody need me to wait a minute at all before I keep going? I don't think so. I think I'm okay to keep going, but let me know if I'm wrong. Okay, so then I'll draw the kind of bumpy part on the left side of that center. And again, you can go past that line at the bottom that you made. In fact, it will give it more of a, like I said, a rounded, bumpy texture, and just erase any lines that are no longer what you need. Then next I will do the stem. And I want to throw this stem in here so that we know where the rest of the bumps are going to go. And if we don't put that stem in, we might get a little bit lost there. So that's why, just changing gears for a second. And I will erase this line in just a moment. All right, so now that we have that in there, I will keep putting the bumps in. So let's do the right one. Now, if you need to add another bump because your pumpkin is maybe a little more circular, you can always add an additional one from where we're going right here. If it goes right to the edge like mine should do, yep, that is fine, because now you have closed this area off, and this is that, you know, bump on the right side for your pumpkin. And you can also fiddle with the outer shape a little bit if you want. You can see I kind of made an extra little bumpy line right there. You can always adjust the shapes of these sections right up until we are painting them and we put in that dark there. That's going to be the final adjustment. So you can see I've adjusted this area like 2 or 3 times because I can still see some of the lines, which will get covered up when we paint. But that's just to say that you can change your mind. It's all good. Sometimes it ends up looking better. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3. If you need to add an extra bump at all for your specific pumpkin, that's always an option. I do want to do the bump that's in the back next. Because that's just going to be fairly an easy enclosure of this right side. So all I'm doing to kind of finish that off is, you can see I've got a little bumpy line right there, and I will erase my original edge line because it just gives it some more texture, some more bumpiness. And then we are done drawing our right side. For the left side, I'm gonna do one more bump that fills half of this space. And then this extra bit will be made into a second bump. And I'm just erasing whatever old lines are there that I don't need anymore.
Uh-oh.
I heard an uh-oh, are you okay?
Oh, no, my dog just decided to come downstairs.
Oh, It was a dog, uh-oh.
Yeah, it wasn't, yeah.
Okay, and then I will be filling in then this extra last piece that I have there. I am going to be changing my shape a little bit. As you can see, this looks a little messy currently, but it is fun to kind of see what that original shape I thought was going to be, and then just kind of see where I've adjusted it just for a moment, and then I'll erase because I don't want to get overwhelmed with pencil lines. And all I'm doing here is just adjusting the width of my stem. Your stem might be fine. I just thought maybe it looked a smidge too thin width-wise after adding some more stuff. So that's all I just did there. And kind of lastly with our drawing is just putting in the back bumps, kind of exactly like we did on this side. So it's pretty much the same thing. It's still a bump up, bump down, bump up. It's just maybe a little bit wider. Well, it definitely is on my left side, but that's fine. That's all we really need. I would like to, however, put one pencil line on each of these sides. You can see I've got the one on the left right here, and then the one on the right here. It just kind of fills in that space and will remind us that we have to put a shadow in there later. And take one final look here. Make sure you don't have any extra pencil lines, because like I said, I know we've adjusted this quite a bit. Since this is a lighter colored thing, we do want to make sure that our pencil lines look kind of neat, because sometimes they can see through. You can also, if you find your pencil lines to be very heavy, I won't do this because my concern is you all seeing my paper, but you can come with an eraser and just slightly go over it to just knock it down in value, but you can still see it if you look for it. I'm going to redarken that again so that you can see it, but I do like to show people how to lighten their pencil marks. And did that drawing go okay for people?
Wonderful. Good instruction.
Oh, thank you. All right. If we are good to keep going, our next step is going to be to start mixing colors to paint. And we are going to have to mix an orange, but you will, for the other colors in this pumpkin, have the yellow right on hand, you know, in your palette, and then some red. And that's perfect. So like I said, we're just going to mix a little bit of an orange together. What I will have us do is paint the orange stuff first. And once we're done with that, I will recommend that we dump and get new water, because then we'll be going into a green and it just will be a little bit different. We don't want to make it look like brown. What do we do if our paint is dry? Your paint is supposed to be dry. I'm just going to grab one of my palettes. I've got a lot of random colors. All of this is dry. So what we're going to do is we are going to activate it with our water on a brush, or with a brush, sorry, in our palette. So find a nice little mixing spot. That could be maybe that big well that's right in the center of your palette to do orange with. I have just a bunch of different palettes lying all over the place, and you can see I mixed an orange in this spot previously, so that'll just continue to be my orange mixing spot. And to make orange, we are going to need the colors yellow and red. What I would like you to do is take your brush and start getting your yellow wet just by getting some water on the brush and rubbing it over the paint. You can see mine was dry, but now it's starting to be, I can move it around and it definitely is coming on my brush. Whoops, I'm sorry. That loud noise was me knocking over a jar of salt. And so what I'll do is take that yellow into the area that I'm mixing. So again, this was just a random area I had already that I had mixed an orange with, so I will just continue to do so. But this is me bringing my yellow into that mixing area. And the reason we're starting off with yellow is because we need more yellow than we will need red. I see someone said, how many colors should we have? I had given the library just a list of broad colors that I thought we might use. So I know that there's a yellow and a red and a brown and a dark blue and a light blue. If my memory serves me correctly, but for this painting, all we will need is our red, our yellow, a blue. So because we are going to make green together and we are making orange together with our yellow and our red. I hope that answered the question okay. So this is me still just bringing my yellow into my mixing spot, and once you have a nice amount of yellow brought over, then we can start very gently and slowly bringing in the red. So I want to barely touch my red. So I'm kind of just working with really watery paint on this edge. So just, like I said, barely touch it because we don't need all that much red to make the orange. So this is me bringing over one little brush full of my red. One little brush full. It made it a light orange, but I think I want to bring over a little bit more to get it to be a smidge darker. So this is my second little brush full of red. And I think that that's a good light orange color that I've got right now. And if you accidentally brought over a little too much red, just bring over a little more yellow and that will balance it out. Did the color mixing go okay for people? If you need any help, just let me know. Thank you. All right. So we've got our orange all mixed. And if your water looks just kind of yellowish, that's fine. We do not need to change our water right now because that's the color that we are going to be working in. And if we're ready to keep going, the next thing to do is just to start putting down our paint. So we're gonna do wet on wet for this. And what that means is we're gonna get our paper wet before we bring the paint into it. The opposite of that being wet on dry, which where we don't get the paper wet, but we will be getting the paper wet. And we're gonna have to jump around a little bit. So I'm gonna pick something kind of in the middle to start with that I know then we can jump around and paint other things while it is drying. So if you remember our two main bumps that we did, start on the leftmost one if you can, and get your brush filled with some water and start to bring that water onto your paper. If it is a smidge yellow or orange, you can see, maybe you can see mine's a smidge yellow or orange. It's fine because that's what we are painting anyways. There is a highlight which can be accomplished by not putting some water in a spot or putting the water everywhere and just not getting all too much paint in that section. So I just got this whole thing wet. I'm gonna demonstrate how I just don't put too much paint in the section. So this whole thing is about this wet. It's obviously fairly shiny. It doesn't run too much though when I like lift it up. So like I don't have any streaks running down. It's not like a river. But it's, I would say, a medium amount of water is on this. And right off the bat, once this is wet, not trying to rush anybody, it's just once you get it wet, you kind of gotta put your paint on. I'm gonna start with our lightest color that we're gonna use, which is gonna be some of the yellow. So the plain yellow, if there's a little bit of red mixed into it, that's okay. But that's what we are going for, is just some plain yellow. I'm trying to get it in a spot that it doesn't glare too much. That's what I'm doing. Okay, so if the camera angle looks a little weird, I'm trying to get you to be able to see the color. So this is just my plain yellow. And remember that highlight I talked about? I'm just not going to be putting paint in that section. It is wet, but I'm just not putting the paint there. And if it does go there, you can just dab it up with a paper towel or a napkin and it should just come right up. So I'm just putting some yellow over almost this whole area, except for that little highlight that I just spoke about. And so that's what it looks like mainly out of the glare. But my piece is still wet. You can see the light is fairly shiny. That's what we want. We want to keep going with this while it's still wet. So next I'm going to come in with our orange that we made together. So the color that you mixed, that's what we're coming in next with. And I don't want to put it over every single place that I put the yellow, because I want some just plain old yellow to be shining through. But I say that I'm putting it in most of the places. And just a little FYI, you can always come back in with more yellow if you feel like your yellow got a little bit lost, or maybe it just doesn't look as vibrant as it did a couple minutes ago. You can always come back in with some more. But I have my nice little highlight, which is just the white of the paper still. I might just bring a smidge more onto mine of my orange. It just kind of scattered about there. And I do try to tell people this, if you ever get like a little hair on your painting, maybe a little pet hair or an eyelash or just a piece of dust, I know it can sometimes be very irritating, but just let it sit there and wait for it to dry. And once it's dry, you can just flick it right off. And then lastly, for our little color trio is I'm just gonna bring in a little bit of red. I don't want this to look like, oh, that's just red, like a tomato. But I want it to bring a nice little, contrast in here. It'll kind of mix together with the other colors that we brought in to make maybe a more reddish orange just right before our eyes. That's the purpose of bringing in the red. And you can always come back in with more of the orange or the yellow. I'm just messing around with doing that myself here. Okay, so that's actually where I'm going to stop messing with it. We can always come back into an area we've already painted once it's dry. So it does not have to be exactly where you want it to be right now. And in 5 minutes, it might look a little bit faded because watercolor, when it dries 10% lighter than what it looks like when it's wet. So we can always come back in. In fact, I will probably have to do that at some point in our painting. Is it okay if I keep going?
Yes, please.
Cool. Just making sure I'm not going too fast. All right, so we cannot paint in this piece or this piece right now, because if we were to put water, it would just bleed. All that color would just follow that water. So we're gonna have to jump around a little bit, like I was saying earlier. So this on the rightmost side isn't touching anything that's wet. So that will be just the next place I choose to go. And again, I am getting this section wet. And I've noticed just like subconsciously, I go kind of fast getting it wet in the middle, but when I go at the edges, I do slow down a little bit. Just as like a technique, but you can see that this whole thing for me is nice and shiny. And same as last time, I'm gonna start with my lightest color first, which is gonna be my plain old yellow. There is a little bit of highlights in here, so maybe just have a couple of places that just don't get paint on it. So you can see a little bit. I've got some kind of long oval shapes on this one, maybe two that don't have any paint in it. Again, you can always lift that out if it just doesn't work out like that. So that is all of my yellow, and then a couple of places where it's just the white of my paper. And if anybody was wondering why there's not a white paint like there is in like acrylic or oil, it's because the white watercolor paint, it's very transparent, so all it does is make it look chalky. So that's why the highlights are the white of our paper. They do make white watercolor paint. I've seen some people do some really cool like smoke effects with it. But just in general, we use the white of our paper as the white or the highlight in our paintings. And next, I'm gonna come in with my orange that we made, and I will try and stick really to the edge, this leftmost edge that I've just kind of drawn this line. And the right kind of side, not all the way up, but towards the lower. And maybe just a little bit on the top. And I will then be bringing in my red. And I'm trying to go kind of light with this. Like I said, I'm using just a little bit of pigment. If it gets a little too red on here, you can always hit it with some yellow. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm just bringing a little bit of yellow back into this. Yellow is just one of those colors that does like to fade a little bit. So that's why I always like to remind people that you can bring more of it in there. Red is another one that likes to fade. Okay, I think I'm going to stop messing with that for now. Does anybody need more time on that piece? Okay. So my first piece that I did is dry in this area, but not really on the, you can still see the shiny on the bottom and the left. So just to play it safe, I'm gonna skip all the way over to my leftmost section. This one does not have a highlight here, so there's nothing that we have to worry about, you know, not painting. So I'm just gonna go for it. And again, putting down my just water. If your water is starting to look very orangey while you're putting it down, is totally fine. And I'm gonna go right on in with my yellow. So I'm just gonna get this whole entire bump here yellow. And then I'm gonna go in with my orange and really start putting that down. So I want to make sure I still am seeing sections of just plain yellow. And I'm going to be very gentle with my red. I do like it just on that kind of inside edge there, just to deepen that color, and maybe just a little bit towards the bottom, but I'm not going like bam in your face with my red. And then just make sure that, you know, your orange and your yellow is still looking as deep in value as it should. Make sure it didn't fade too much. Does anybody need more time before I keep going? Okay. Now, my first piece that I did is almost dry, but that second one still needs a little bit of time, and obviously the one that we just did still needs a little bit of time. So I'd like to come on to the back now and pop in these little areas. So we will do these wet on dry. So we do not need to get this section wet. And the reason for that is it's fairly small. My left side one is almost touching that first one we did, but I do have a smidge of buffer from the drawing of my stem. So that is fine, but also it's dry up here for me. I just don't know if everyone's first one is completely dry. You can see my bottom of my first one is still a little shiny. So if you don't have a buffer and it is gonna hit something that's wet, maybe you do the opposite side that I'm suggesting, but it's gonna be the same color on both of these. So I'm gonna bring in my orange first, actually. We don't really have yellow showing up back here. So I'm gonna wet on dry, so I'm not getting this area wet. First, wet on dry, put my orange paint in this little section. And if you need to get it a little darker, but you just kind of keep moving the paint around, just give it a tap, tap, tap with your brush that's full of the pigment. That will help to place that pigment a little bit better. All right, and then the same thing on the other one back here. Alternatively, if you just want to wait a few minutes before doing one of these pieces, that is also an option if you need to. But I have both successfully painted in orange. And while they're still kind of wet, I do want to bring a little bit of alizarin crimson into them. And I'm just bringing a teeny smidge and going kind of like that tap, tap, tap I was saying earlier. Just kind of lay some of that color down. Just right at the edge on the inside, not the outermost edge, on both pieces. You can always come back in with more of that orange to help blend it in a little bit more. But that red really helps get a little bit of definition in there. Okay. So here is where we're gonna kind of individually look and see what is the next best area for each of you to paint. For me, it would be this one. Because nothing is wet on this side, even though we painted this most recently besides those two areas. For some reason on mine, it is still wet at that bottom right corner there. maybe because this was a smaller area. So I'm going to jump over to here, but if you cannot paint this for whatever reason and you need to jump over to here instead, that is fine. I just want to point out, in case you are doing that, that the right one here has another highlight area where, you know, we don't put that paint in. It's kind of right here and right here. So if you need to paint that for you, that's fine. It's just going to be that same technique that we've done in these two pieces. But I'm going to jump over to here. I'm going to get this piece wet. And this is once again going to be our yellow, orange, red color stack. Okay, so I have that piece wet. And I'm going to start in with my yellow. I'm just painting this whole section here. Then I will go in with my orange, and I'm going to keep my orange a little more to the left and to the bottom on this piece. Same thing with my red. To the left and to the bottom. Oops, I got a little too much orange over there. All I'm doing to take that out, I didn't mean to do that, but I do like to point it out when I make little mistakes, is I have a clean, damp brush, and I'm just pulling that paint right out. Clean, wet brush, pulling it right out, and then I'll come in with the color it should be, which is just the yellow. That's much better there. I will go a little bit darker with my red at the very bottom. And then of course I'll blend that in with a little bit of orange. Does anyone need another moment on that part? Okay, I think we're good. I don't want to be too fast. Okay, so I will jump to now this part, which, just a little warning, I do have that spot is just not drawing for me. So I'm gonna do my best. I might just have to kind of fix it a little bit later, which is fine. So I'm just getting this part wet. And again, I'm going to be coming in with my yellow first. And I'm just going to kind of go right down the middle so that I make sure that I have those two little highlights. Okay, so I did nick that little area a tiny smidge. And if you can see, there's just the slightest little bit of bleeding that's happening, but it's not terrible. But I do like to point it out when, you know, something is happening. If it had spread everywhere and just then this had no more color, I would have been like, whoa, gotta fix that. But that's not bad, so that's fine. And I will come in with my orange and really kind of concentrate that towards the bottom a little bit, but also in this left edge that goes right next to this one, just to kind of help that separate a little bit. And then of course, my red at the bottom and in that little line of the separation of the pumpkin pieces, sections, I guess. I think I'm gonna leave that as is after I hit this just with a little more yellow. Yeah, much better. And the last section that we have to paint is just these other two little bumps. Obviously, the one that we just did is still going to be wet at that edge. So I would look to the opposite side. This is dry for me, which is nice. And even if the whole thing wasn't dry, it's just the top that would need to be for us to fill that in. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, fill that in with a little bit of orange, just like we did these other parts. Wet on dry, a little bit of orange first. And then come on in at those bottom edges with some red to just kind of help distinguish that a little bit. It gives it a little bit of a shadow. And funny enough, my right side is actually dry enough to do the same thing on the one right above it. But if it's not and you need to wait a couple minutes, that is completely okay. I would rather people need to, you know, do it in a couple minutes than have it go everywhere where we don't want it. Same thing, a little bit of red at the bottom. And we have our orange of our pumpkin done. I do want to give the option. I will mix a green to do the stem with, but if you are not about that, like you don't want it to be the green, you can make it brown because, you know, pumpkin stems are also brown. So I'm just giving you that choice there. If you are going to mix a green and your water also looks fairly pumpkinish, I would recommend that we just take a second to go dump that and get some fresh water. Okay. And so if you are gonna mix a green, it is yellow and blue. If you have a tiny well in your palette that doesn't have a color in it that you'd like to mix this green there, that's cool. You could do it on a paper plate if you don't have room, or if you are just done with your orange color and you don't need to put any more orange, you can take a paper towel and just kind of wipe whatever's left out of that center part of your palette and use that area to then mix the green. I'm just going to move my painting out of the way for just a second. I'm going to just clean a little spot off in my palette. You can see it just comes up fairly easy. And if you are mixing a green, it is yellow and blue, and it's going to be the same technique that we did to make the orange, which is we bring a little bit of yellow into our mixing area first. There we go. Because we only need a smidge of blue and it needs to be mainly yellow. Or you can just take a little break and just use the brown that's in your palette to do instead of making a green. Brought some yellow on over.
Okay, why are we doing all of this?
Doing the yellow. We're mixing the green for the stem of the pumpkin, but again, you can use the brown color if you would rather. So just, I like to give people options. And then I'm bringing just a little smidge of the blue. I'm going to use the darker blue to make my green that's in your palette. It should look really dark. Maybe you think it almost looks black, but then if you add a little bit of water to it, it kind of pulls apart and is actually just a darker blue. And so that's a fine green color for what we need. Don't need too much of it. You don't need to mix a lot. Does anybody need me to wait a moment before I continue painting? Okay, I think we're good. Like I said, you can be using either color for this, either the green that we just made together or just the plain old brown. And we are going to do this stem really wet on dry. So I've got the green on my brush and I'm going to just paint some lines. The first one kind of butting up against where that pencil line is towards the top / left. Skipping a little piece just for a minute. So this is going to look like some stripes for a moment. And doing a second line. And I will do it a third time. and possibly a fourth time if you have some extra room like I do. Okay, so again, this does look like some stripes for just a minute, but they will not for long. If you did make a green, but you would also like to throw in some hints of some brown, that is an option I think would look kind of cool. So I'm just throwing in some little hints of the brown while this is still kind of just drying. And before it dries, I have just cleaned my brush and made sure that it's damp by wiping it on a paper towel. And I'm going to kind of just come in and with a damp brush, give this a little blend. So it's not going to look so much like stripes anymore. It will look much more blended. And this is kind of just going to turn into like dirty water that we're painting with. And that's what we are going for. If you kind of completely lost some of your stripes, you can always add a little more of whatever that main color was. That's what I'm doing currently. Because what we have left in here are just some highlights. Just like we have on this part where there's just not really any pigment. That's exactly what we just repeated. I will kind of finish my end up here though, just with a little bit of green or brown or both. Remember, we can always make it darker. So once this dries, we can come back in and make it darker, which we are going to do. But it is a little bit harder to make it lighter. It just requires a little more elbow grease. Does anybody need another moment on this stem as much as we've done so far? Because we're going to do another thing. But just up until this point, does anyone need another moment? Okay. Cool. If you could bear with me for one more color mixing, I'd like to show you the recipe for making black, which we are going to put into this piece to give it that last little bit of shadow, which will really kind of make it three-dimensional. Because we have our highlights, we have our midtones, we do have some shadows. The red kind of acts like that, but a black will really push that towards the edge. And once this dries, we can always add a little more green to it if we need to. So again, if you're out of a mixing space, you can get a paper plate. You could do it on a ceramic plate if you wanted to. I was in a pinch one day and this is still full of paint that I use, just a little teacup saucer. And the black is made with two colors. It is made with the indigo, which is that dark blue in your palette, and burnt umber, so the brown that's in your palette. And so, like I said, just kind of designate a little mixing space. If you're done with your green, you can wipe that up too. And we start by bringing over into our mixing space the burnt umber color. So the brown, that's what we will bring over first. Okay, so that's just me bringing over a little bit of the burnt umber. And then I will bring in a little bit of indigo. Now, when you bring in the indigo, if your color that you mix looks green, like a dark green, you need to bring over a little bit more burnt umber. If it looks like a sepia, like it still looks mainly brown, you need to bring a little more indigo over. So you want something that's right in the middle, just a nice dark color. And if you're wondering why we make it instead of just getting a tube of black, it's fine to get a tube of black, especially if maybe like you wanted to do a monotone like black and white painting. But when you're working with color, your pieces just look much better if you make the black with colors. So this is made with, blue and brown, and it's just more natural looking on the eye. So that's why I do like to share my black mixing recipe here. And I'm done with my black color. Okay. Yep, so that's what we were looking for, just a nice dark color. If anybody needs help, let me know. I know that can
Yeah, could you show the indigo that you're using?
Yes. Okay, it's gonna look a little bit contaminated for a second because there's black or brown in it. But let me kind of clean that up. So it's really kind of a dark blue. Do you see that?
Okay. Okay, I think I can identify it now. Thank you.
You're welcome. And that just kind of, doing that just takes a little bit of practice. That's all. Like I said, when you get a nice dark neutral color, that is what you are looking for. And with the black, I'm going to make sure that my brush is damp, so not soaking wet, and get a little bit of black on it. And wet on dry, just start bringing that into some sections that I want to deepen. So I'm kind of doing it right at some of the edges at the bottom, maybe in some of those lines. It's just going to help push it a little bit more. And you can always blend it in with a little bit of brown or some green. But that just really helps make that look a little more dimensional. Blending in with a little bit of water. A little bit of green. If you're feeling fancy, you can put some of the black maybe into some sections that you want to deepen. This is optional. I just like to show people. how it can really kind of push your piece. It's always going to look weird when you put it in like one spot. So if you do want to do it, I would commit to doing it, just because you won't get the full effect only putting it in one place. It will just look off to your eye. So that's why you can see I'm just kind of spreading it and just blending it out with a little bit of water on my brush. And if it goes too far, you can bring in whatever color is currently around that, like some more red or orange. But yeah, this is what's gonna kind of make it look that 3D shape. And last, one more optional thing is if you want to do a shadow, you don't have to. You have to make sure things are completely dry in this area. Since our highlights are coming from this way, because that's where they are, a shadow would only make sense going that way. So I like to just take a little bit of black on my brush, and so this is really looking gray for right now. And wet on dry, just kind of pop that down. Again, optional, you do not need to do this. And then I come back in with a little more black just in that corner where the object is touching the ground. That's where it's going to be darkest. So if you look at your fingers in some light, it's darkest where they are touching right up against each other. And then it just gets, blended out with a little bit of clean water, or clean-ish water. I'd say mine is clean-ish at this point. Yeah, that is our pumpkin. If anybody has any questions, you can let me know. If anybody wants to hold theirs up and get some feedback, I can do that. If we maybe want to stop recording here to do that, that would probably be good.